They carved their lives into the heart of the jungle, unaware that their daily rituals would shape the course of history. Yet, it was these seemingly simple habits of the Maya and Olmec that held the key to their greatness and their mystery. Subscribe to the channel to stay tuned for more discoveries, and drop a comment letting us know where in the world you're watching from. As you settle deeper into this ancient world, imagine yourself in the heart of a bustling Mayan city, perhaps in Tikal or Copan. The air is heavy with humidity, and the ground beneath your feet is soft from the recent rains. As you walk through the city, you notice the sound of footsteps in the dirt paths, the calls of market vendors selling their wares, wooden baskets filled with vibrant fruits and vegetables, the sweet smell of freshly ground maize filling the air. In the distance, you can hear the sound of a ceremonial drum beating softly, setting the rhythm of the day. The people around you are a mixture of laborers, artisans, traders, and priests, each moving in their own rhythm but all tied together by a common purpose. The Maya, with their advanced agricultural practices, spent much of their lives cultivating maize, beans, and squash in the lush rainforests that surrounded their cities. The milpas, the small fields carved out of the dense jungle, are worked by farmers who toil under the hot sun, their sweat mixing with the earthy scent of the soil as they plant and harvest crops. Every piece of land is carefully managed, as the Maya understood the balance of nature, the importance of the land for survival, and the need for careful stewardship to sustain their way of life. Now shift your gaze from the Maya city to the coast, to the land of the Olmec. The air here is different. It carries the sharp tang of salt and the scent of wet stone. Picture yourself standing near the Gulf Coast, where the Olmec, the mother culture of Mesoamerica, carved their niche. Their lives were deeply tied to the rhythm of the sea. Fishing nets glisten in the sunlight as fishermen bring in their catch, tropical fish and shellfish, preparing the day's meals in the cool shade of palm-thatched huts. The Olmec, too, engaged in agriculture, though their primary crops were rooted in the fertile, flood-prone soils along the Gulf Coast. They grew maize, beans, and squash, but also took advantage of the abundance of fish, seafood, and other coastal resources. In both the Maya and Olmec worlds, communal life was a fundamental aspect of daily existence. The Maya were deeply social, their communities built around a central plaza where families gathered, and elders offered guidance. The Olmec, while also socially complex, had a somewhat different focus. Their society was more hierarchical, with a clear distinction between the elite, the artisans, and the laborers. However, the underlying connection between both cultures was their reliance on collective labor, whether it was clearing jungle land for crops or carving massive stone monuments from the earth itself. Imagine the sweat on your brow as you stand in a Mayan village, or the salt in the air as you feel the ocean breeze touch your skin in Olmec lands. Both societies depended on their environments for sustenance, yet each shaped their daily lives in unique ways. The Maya, their cities hidden in the dense forest, had to learn to live in harmony with the land around them. The Olmec, living by the coast, became masters of aquatic resources, weaving the rhythms of the ocean into their daily lives. In this comparative view, the daily lives of the Maya and Olmec reflect a deep connection to their environments, but also reveal contrasting approaches to their surroundings, one shaped by the dense, fertile jungles, and the other by the dynamic, resource-rich coasts. Both civilizations depended on their agriculture, but the ways in which they interacted with the land, and with each other, would set them apart in the centuries to come. Imagine yourself now, standing on the edge of a vast, ancient jungle. The air here is thick, humid, and alive with the subtle noises of nature. The dense canopy above forms a patchwork of deep green leaves, where the sunlight filters through in dappled patterns. The floor is soft and damp beneath your feet, rich with the scent of earth, moss, and the decaying leaves of centuries past. This is the realm of the Maya, an empire that carved its existence into the heart of Mesoamerica's most intense and wild terrain, the rainforest. The Maya knew their environment intimately. The forest was both their challenge and their ally. The dense jungle provided them with resources, but also demanded careful attention. The Maya were masterful land managers, practicing slash-and-burn agriculture to clear space for their crops. They planted maize, beans, and squash in the rich soil that lay beneath the trees. Yet they were also keenly aware of the delicate balance of the ecosystem. The same rains that nourished their crops could also flood their fields, washing away the soil they had worked so carefully to cultivate. The Maya adapted to this ever-changing environment, learning to build in harmony with it, not against it. As you walk further into this dense jungle, you can almost feel the rhythm of their lives, measured by the rise and fall of the seasons, the rainfall, and the ebbing of the rivers. The Maya developed advanced agricultural techniques to cope with these fluctuations, terracing their fields to prevent erosion, creating irrigation systems to channel water during dry spells, and carefully selecting crop varieties suited to the climate. They relied on the forest for timber, medicinal plants, and even hunting, crafting tools and utensils from the surrounding environment. The jungle was their home, and they became its stewards, deeply intertwined with its rhythm and its cycles. Now, gently transition your mind to the coastal world of the Olmec. Imagine standing on the edge of the Gulf Coast, where the salty breeze blows gently against your face. The air is thick with the scent of brine, and the sound of the surf crashing against the shore provides a steady, calming backdrop. Before you stretches a landscape quite different from the Maya's dense, humid jungle. The Olmec people lived in a region blessed with rich soil, yet surrounded by water. Its proximity to the sea made it a prime location for fishing and trade. The Olmec harnessed the abundant coastal resources, making the Gulf Coast their home for thousands of years. Here, the daily life of the people was shaped by the waters that surrounded them. Fish, shellfish, and other marine life were vital sources of food, and the Olmec were skilled fishermen. They constructed rafts and boats, which became essential for transportation, trade, and fishing. The coast provided not only sustenance, but also a strategic advantage, proximity to both the sea and fertile lands. The Olmec flourished in this environment, using the natural resources to build a complex and prosperous society. Yet, despite the relative abundance of resources, the coastal landscape also posed its challenges. The region was prone to flooding, particularly during the rainy season, when rivers would swell and inundate the land. Unlike the Maya, whose reliance on the dense jungle required them to create sophisticated methods of land management, the Olmec were more focused on utilizing the rivers, lagoons, and coastal plains. Their interactions with the environment were less about manipulating it, and more about learning to coexist with the natural cycles of the sea and the sky. You might sense the distinct difference in rhythm between the two environments. The Maya, wrapped in the dense, green embrace of the rainforest, measured time by the cycle of crops and the changes in the seasons. The Olmec, on the other hand, had a more fluid relationship with the environment, shaped by the tides of the sea, the river's gentle flow, and the coastal winds. Their way of life was dictated by a different set of rhythms: the pulse of the ocean, the rise and fall of the waters, and the seasonal shifts that dictated the availability of resources. As you imagine these two contrasting worlds, one thick with the lush, verdant growth of the jungle, the other framed by the endless horizon of the coast, you can begin to understand how these environments shaped the civilizations that grew within them. For the Maya, it was a constant dance with the jungle, while for the Olmec, it was a harmony with the sea. Both civilizations found their sustenance in these environments, but their methods of interacting with the land, the water, and each other were shaped by the world around them. As you journey through the heart of ancient Mesoamerica, you now enter a world where religion and ritual govern much of daily life. The scent of burning incense and copal, a resin used in sacred offerings, fills the air. In the midst of the rainforest, surrounded by the hum of life, the Maya people engage in ceremonies that connect them with the gods, their ancestors, and the cycles of nature. Across the land, their rituals are at the center of their social and political structure, shaping everything from agriculture to warfare. The Maya believed that their world was a fragile and dynamic place, one in which the gods were constantly engaged in maintaining balance and harmony. Their religious ceremonies were an essential part of keeping the cosmic forces in equilibrium. Picture yourself walking into one of their towering stone temples, surrounded by intricate carvings depicting gods and mythic beings. The air is heavy with the scent of burning incense, and the sound of drums reverberates from deep within the stone walls. Priests, wearing elaborate feathered headdresses, prepare to perform a sacred rite. These rituals, which could involve the offering of food, incense, or even blood, were believed to nourish the gods and sustain the delicate harmony of the universe. At the heart of Maya religious practice was the concept of reciprocity, giving to the gods in order to receive their favor. The Maya believed that their world was cyclic, governed by the movements of the stars, the sun, and the moon. Each ceremony was intricately timed, reflecting the celestial movements. The Maya built their cities with precise astronomical alignment, using their observatories to track the movement of celestial bodies and plan their rituals accordingly. These ceremonies weren't simply religious acts, they were also deeply political. The ruler of each city-state often took part in these rites, reinforcing their divine right to lead. Through sacrifice and prayer, the ruler would ensure the city's prosperity, while also demonstrating their own power and authority. Across Mesoamerica, the Olmec, often referred to as the mother culture of the region, held their own deeply spiritual ceremonies, though their practices were somewhat different from those of the Maya. The Olmecs' religious beliefs were intricately tied to the natural world, and their rituals often revolved around the earth, fertility, and the life-giving forces of water and maize. Picture yourself standing at the edge of an Olmec ceremonial center, where massive stone heads stare into the distance. These colossal statues, carved from basalt, depict powerful leaders or perhaps gods. They seem to watch over the land as it shifts beneath their feet, while ceremonial offerings are made at the foot of these statues, perhaps with incense or other sacred objects. The Olmec were among the first to build large, ceremonial centers where rituals took place. Unlike the Maya, who centered much of their spiritual life around temples and palaces, the Olmec focused on these expansive ceremonial complexes. Here, priests would lead sacred dances, chants, and offerings that were meant to honor their gods and ensure the fertility of the land. Their primary deities were closely associated with the natural elements, including jaguars, water, and maize, the very forces that sustained their lives. One of the most iconic features of Olmec religious practice was the use of bloodletting, much like the Maya. Rituals involving blood sacrifice were common, believed to appease the gods and guarantee the prosperity of the community. However, the Olmec also placed a heavy emphasis on shamanism, with religious leaders acting as intermediaries between the gods and the people. They used various hallucinogenic substances and trance states to communicate with the spiritual world, seeking guidance and protection for the people. While both the Maya and the Olmec used bloodletting and sacrifices, the scale and the nature of their rituals diverged in important ways. For the Maya, the rituals were often grand public spectacles, with rulers participating in complex ceremonies on the top of their towering temples. The Olmec, on the other hand, engaged in smaller, more intimate rituals centered around their ceremonial centers. These gatherings were often less about public display and more about invoking spiritual power to ensure the survival of the community. The Maya also had an extensive pantheon of gods, with deities representing the sun, moon, rain, maize, and even death. These gods were worshipped in ceremonies that could last for days, with music, dance, and chants accompanying each offering. The Maya believed that the gods required continuous offerings, often in the form of bloodletting from the nobility, or even human sacrifice, to maintain the cosmic balance. These sacrifices, while grim by modern standards, were viewed as essential to the continuation of life and the health of the earth. The priests, as intermediaries between the gods and the people, were the key figures in these rituals, overseeing the complex ceremonies that took place in the city-state's sacred centers. In contrast, the Olmec, though similarly reliant on ritual to ensure the prosperity of their civilization, were more focused on smaller-scale ceremonies that drew upon the spiritual connection to nature. The Olmec believed that their gods were omnipresent in the world around them, from the jaguar that prowled the forest to the rainstorms that nourished the land. These gods were more abstract than the Maya deities, representing forces of nature rather than specific celestial bodies. Rituals were thus more localized, often taking place near sacred natural landmarks or ceremonial centers, and centered on invoking these powerful natural forces to bless the land and its people. Yet, despite these differences in ceremonial focus, both the Maya and the Olmec shared a fundamental belief in the necessity of giving to the gods. For both, religious ceremonies were vital to sustaining the balance of life. Whether through the grand displays of Maya rulers atop their stepped pyramids, or the quiet offerings at the foot of Olmec colossal heads, both cultures were united in the belief that their survival depended on maintaining a constant connection with the divine. As you continue your journey through the ancient landscapes of Mesoamerica, the sounds of the jungle fade into the background, and you are drawn toward the impressive structures of these two great civilizations, the Maya and the Olmec. Towering pyramids rise from the dense greenery of the jungle, while along the Gulf Coast, colossal stone heads gaze out over the land. These physical monuments were not simply symbols of power or artistic achievement. They also serve as the silent testimony to the powerful rulers who commanded these civilizations. The roles of these rulers were fundamental to the stability and spiritual well-being of their people, though their paths to leadership, and their functions within their societies, differed markedly. Let us first immerse ourselves in the world of the Maya, where the rulers were not just political leaders, but were seen as divine figures, intermediaries between the gods and the people. Picture yourself standing in the central plaza of a Maya city, perhaps in Tikal or Copan. Before you rises the towering step pyramid of the temple, its face adorned with intricately carved glyphs and images of the gods. The air here feels heavy with the weight of centuries, yet also vibrant with the energy of life. At the top of this grand pyramid, the ruler, draped in elaborate feathers, jade ornaments, and ceremonial attire, stands before a gathering of his people. For the Maya, the role of the ruler was deeply spiritual. He was not simply a secular authority. He was believed to be divinely chosen, the earthly representative of the gods. The rulers were thought to have descended from the divine realm, and their very presence among the people affirmed the celestial order. The Maya ruler was a figure who maintained the cosmic balance, ensuring that the gods were appeased, the harvests plentiful, and the city-state prosperous. These rulers were often seen as divine intermediaries who communicated directly with the gods. They performed grand ceremonies at the temples, conducted sacred rites, and offered prayers to ensure their people's well-being. The ruler's power, then, was not just political but also spiritual, as he ensured that the cosmic forces that governed nature were kept in harmony. The influence of the ruler extended into all facets of Maya life. He was the one who could call upon the gods for rain, success in war, and fertility of the soil. In exchange, the gods required offerings, sometimes in the form of bloodletting or even human sacrifice. These acts were not viewed as violence, but as sacred offerings, vital to maintaining the universe's delicate balance. The Maya ruler, as a godly representative, was responsible for ensuring that these acts were performed, keeping the cosmic order intact. Yet, while the Maya rulers were seen as divine figures, their power was not absolute. Maya society was composed of numerous city-states, each with its own ruler, and there was a strong sense of competition between these rulers. These city-state rulers were sometimes allies, but at other times, they were enemies, and the Maya engaged in frequent wars, where the ruler's role was not only spiritual but also military. The ruler's success in battle would reinforce his divine right to rule. The Maya king's role was thus multifaceted, combining political, religious, and military leadership. His legitimacy depended on the favor of the gods and the success of his people. Now, imagine stepping away from the jungle and into the coastal world of the Olmec, where the environment and social structure created a different model of leadership. The Olmec rulers were not so much divine kings but were more akin to priestly leaders. Their power, like that of the Maya, was rooted in religion, but their role within the society was somewhat different. As you walk across the Olmec ceremonial center, you find yourself surrounded by the imposing presence of the colossal stone heads, each carved from basalt, depicting what may have been leaders or deities. These statues, towering over the landscape, offer a glimpse into the monumental reverence for leadership within Olmec society. While the Maya ruler was a divine intermediary, the Olmec leader's authority was based on a combination of spiritual power and elite status. The Olmec rulers, likely priests or shamans, wielded significant influence over both religious and political matters. These leaders were believed to possess the ability to communicate with the gods and act as mediators between the divine and human realms, much like the Maya rulers. However, the Olmec leaders did not hold the same level of direct divine status as the Maya kings. Instead, they were revered for their wisdom and spiritual power, and their role was more focused on maintaining the ritual and ceremonial functions of the society. The Olmec ruled from ceremonial centers, which were likely the hubs of religious activity. Unlike the Maya, who had large cities with palaces and temples dedicated to their rulers, the Olmec placed more emphasis on the creation of sacred spaces, where rituals could be conducted. Here, in these sacred centers, the Olmec elite and their priestly rulers would perform complex ceremonies, which might include offerings of food, incense, and possibly blood, all meant to maintain the spiritual balance of their world. The Olmec rulers were the spiritual guides of their people, maintaining the cosmic order through their ceremonies and leadership. But the Olmec were not as militaristic as the Maya, and their social structure was less dependent on conquest and expansion. The Olmec rulers, while holding significant influence, did not face the same pressures of warfare and territorial competition that the Maya rulers did. Instead, their authority was more rooted in the ability to maintain harmony between the people and the gods. Their monumental stone heads, now scattered across the landscape, suggest a society that revered leadership through symbols of power and divine connection. Despite the differences in their respective roles, the rulers of both the Maya and the Olmecs shared a common understanding of leadership. Both were deeply intertwined with religion and were seen as intermediaries between the human and divine realms. The Maya ruler was a direct representative of the gods, ensuring cosmic order through elaborate rituals and military conquests. In contrast, the Olmec ruler was more of a spiritual guide, whose power stemmed from their role as religious leaders and their connection to the divine forces of nature. Both, however, understood that their power was not absolute but reliant on maintaining balance within their societies and their relationship with the gods. As you journey through the dense jungles of the Maya world and the misty coastal regions of the Olmec, one thing becomes apparent. Their civilizations were not only marked by their intellectual achievements, but by their monumental architecture. The air is thick with the weight of history, and every step you take brings you closer to understanding the monumental scale of these ancient societies. In this segment, we will explore the contrasting architectural feats of the Maya and the Olmec, two cultures whose creations still stand today, though in very different forms. First, picture yourself standing before the towering pyramid of the Maya. You have arrived in the heart of the jungle, perhaps in the ancient city of Tikal, where the towering temple eye rises against the skyline. The jungle around you seems to hum with life, and as you look up, the sight of this immense structure takes your breath away. The pyramid, composed of layers of stone, stands as a testament to the Maya's mastery over both engineering and religion. Its stepped structure rises high into the sky, with each level adorned with intricate carvings depicting gods, kings, and mythological stories. The very shape of the pyramid, steep and triangular, was symbolic. It was a link between heaven and earth, a connection between the mortal world and the divine. The Maya pyramids were not mere tombs or monuments, they were the center of religious life. These temples atop the pyramids were sacred spaces where rituals, including bloodletting and offerings, took place. The pyramid was a focal point for the community, a place of spiritual significance where the ruler would perform ceremonies to ensure the prosperity of the people. Each of the Maya cities had its own pyramidal temples, which were used for astronomical observations as well. The Maya were keen astronomers, and their pyramids were often aligned with celestial events, such as the solstices and equinoxes. The pyramid was thus not only a religious center but a tool for measuring time and aligning with the cosmos. As you walk closer to the pyramid, the rough texture of the stone beneath your feet and the coolness of the shadows cast by the structure create a sense of awe. You can almost hear the faint hum of the drums, the soft chanting of priests, and the movement of people gathering for a sacred ceremony. The presence of the pyramid is imposing, yet calming, a reminder of the Maya's connection to their gods and the enduring strength of their civilization. Now, shift your gaze across the landscape to the coastal plains of the Olmec, where a different kind of architectural achievement awaits you. In the distance, you see the massive stone heads that dot the landscape of the Olmec ceremonial centers. These colossal heads, carved from basalt, are perhaps the most famous relics of Olmec culture. Picture yourself standing before one of these towering statues, their faces solemn and dignified. The scale of these heads is overwhelming, their features exaggerated: broad noses, heavy lips, and powerful, unwavering gazes. Each head, weighing several tons, was intricately carved, likely to represent the rulers or divine figures who held sway over Olmec society. Unlike the Maya pyramids, which were designed to reflect the heavens and were used in religious rituals, the Olmec heads were more likely a symbol of power and authority. These statues were not merely artistic creations but served as a visual representation of the Olmec elite, likely the rulers themselves. Some scholars suggest that these colossal heads were portraits of powerful Olmec leaders, their exaggerated features meant to convey the strength and influence of the individual. They were not designed to be functional in the same way as the Maya pyramids. Rather, they were monumental representations of the Olmec leadership and their connection to the divine. The colossal heads were placed in strategic locations within Olmec ceremonial centers, often in front of large plazas where public rituals and gatherings took place. These statues, though not used for the astronomical observations seen in the Maya pyramids, still held significant spiritual power. The Olmec believed in the supernatural power of their rulers, and these heads may have served as a constant reminder of the divine right of the rulers to lead. The presence of the heads in the landscape, staring down at the people, would have reinforced the political and spiritual power of the Olmec elite. Unlike the Maya pyramids, which were built over time and formed part of a larger city, the Olmec heads were singular monumental sculptures, isolated but powerful. The Olmec left behind a landscape that was dotted with these heads, and their presence was a form of enduring communication, a message from the past, reminding the people of their rulers' strength and divine favor. The material used to carve these heads, basalt, was not local to the Gulf Coast region, which suggests that the Olmec invested considerable effort into sourcing these stones. This also hints at the Olmecs' vast network of trade routes, as they transported these massive blocks of basalt from distant mountain ranges. The effort it took to transport and carve these stones speaks to the Olmecs' dedication to their rulers and their belief in the power of these symbols. As you stand before these monumental sculptures, the cool, smooth stone beneath your hand contrasts with the warm, humid air of the coast. The heads are silent, their gazes unwavering, but they speak volumes about the importance of leadership in Olmec society. The ritual power of the Maya pyramids and the symbolic strength of the Olmec heads serve as poignant reminders of the deep connection between architecture, religion, and governance in these ancient civilizations. Imagine, once again, stepping away from the dense rainforest of the Maya and toward the heart of their intellectual pursuits. The air here is slightly cooler, as you climb the steep stone steps of a pyramid in one of the ancient Maya cities, perhaps at Uaxactun or Copan. The sounds of the bustling city fade as you reach the summit, where the view opens up to the expanse of jungle stretching out in all directions. On this summit, a very different kind of ritual was performed, a ritual that involved not just offerings to the gods, but an intimate connection with the heavens. The Maya were exceptional astronomers, their knowledge of the night sky far beyond that of most ancient civilizations. At the top of the pyramid, an observatory stood, an intricately designed structure that was used to observe the celestial bodies and track the movements of the stars, planets, and the moon. The Maya recognized the profound significance of the stars, not just for navigation, but for their role in the cycles of life, agriculture, rituals, and even governance. Imagine yourself standing silently at the summit, as priests carefully observe the movement of Venus, the morning star. They would use this knowledge to time the agricultural calendar, plan religious ceremonies, and guide political decisions. The pyramid steps, meticulously aligned to the cardinal points, facilitated these observations. Every aspect of their buildings, from the placement of the city to the architecture of their temples, was designed with a deep respect for the cosmos. The Maya believed that the movements of celestial bodies were a reflection of the divine order, and they incorporated these astronomical cycles into their understanding of the universe. The alignment of their observatories was no accident. They used the stars and planets not only to chart the passage of time, but also to synchronize their agricultural practices with the cosmos. The stars were believed to influence the cycles of rain, the fertility of the soil, and the abundance of the harvest. The Maya used this knowledge to predict the seasons, and their agricultural system was intricately tied to these predictions. The observatories were also sacred spaces, where priests would conduct rituals to honor the gods, asking for favorable conditions for crops or for protection in times of war. The stars, they believed, were the messengers of the gods. Now, as you leave the observatory and move towards the Olmec world, the landscape changes dramatically. Instead of the towering pyramids, you find yourself among a series of large, open ceremonial centers, set against the backdrop of the Gulf Coast. The air is warm and salty, and the sound of waves gently crashing against the shore echoes in the distance. Here, in contrast to the Maya's celestial gaze, the Olmec focused their attention on the earth and the natural forces that sustained life: rain, fertility, and maize. As you step into one of their ceremonial centers, you notice the arrangement of the site. Unlike the Maya, who built their observatories atop tall pyramids for a clear view of the sky, the Olmec placed their ceremonial centers in the midst of the land itself. These centers, with their massive stone sculptures and wide open spaces, were designed for public rituals, often involving large gatherings of people. The Olmec, though they did have a keen sense of the cycles of nature, did not have observatories like the Maya. Instead, Their ceremonial centers were places where ritual and community life converged. The layout of these centers was simple but powerful: large plazas with colossal stone heads placed strategically around the area, likely to serve as visual reminders of the spiritual power of the Olmec elite. These heads, which may have represented gods or rulers, were placed at key locations where ceremonies would take place, possibly to influence the very forces of nature that governed life in the Gulf Coast region. In these centers, the Olmec focused not on the distant stars, but on the natural world surrounding them: rain, rivers, and the fertility of the land. The relationship with the earth was central to their rituals, and they believed that by honoring the gods who controlled these forces, they could ensure a successful harvest, secure protection from enemies, and maintain the prosperity of their society. The Olmec did not build monumental structures solely for stargazing. Instead, they constructed vast ceremonial centers where the natural world and spiritual power intertwined, and the power of the rulers and the gods was represented through symbolic art and architecture. While the Maya engaged in stargazing to determine the passage of time and the proper alignment of their agricultural activities with the stars, the Olmec's focus was more earthbound, centered on fertility, nature, and the power of the gods as expressed through natural forces. The Olmec may not have had the same advanced astronomical knowledge as the Maya, but their ceremonial centers were no less significant. These spaces, surrounded by colossal stone heads and ritual offerings, were dedicated to communing with the gods to ensure the prosperity and stability of their society. The stark difference between these two cultures' approaches to the heavens and the earth is embodied in their built environments. The Maya, with their pyramidal observatories and the alignment of their cities to celestial events, were masters of astronomy, aligning their agricultural and religious practices with the movements of the stars. The Olmec, in contrast, built their ceremonial spaces with a focus on earthly and natural forces, creating monumental structures that embodied the power of the earth and the gods. As you stand in the Olmec ceremonial center, surrounded by the looming presence of the colossal heads and the openness of the land, you begin to understand the different ways these two civilizations viewed their place in the universe. The Maya, with their keen understanding of the stars, reached out toward the cosmos, while the Olmec, grounded in the rhythms of the earth, focused their spiritual energy on the natural world that sustained them. Now, imagine the air thickening with the scent of exotic spices, the aroma of roasted cacao beans mingling with the fresh smell of earth and wood, and the constant hum of a busy market scene. As you stroll through the bustling plazas of the ancient Maya city, it becomes clear that these civilizations were deeply interconnected through vast trade networks, reaching from the dense jungles to the distant coastal plains. The exchange of goods was a central part of Maya life, and the same is true for the Olmec, though their trade routes and traded goods differed slightly. In both worlds, however, trade was not only about survival, it was a vehicle for culture, politics, and the expression of power. In the Maya world, trade was woven into the fabric of daily life. The markets, located in the heart of the city, were a vibrant tapestry of colors and sounds, with traders offering everything from the finest jade to exotic feathers, textiles, and tropical fruits. Picture the lively chatter of merchants as they display their wares: mounds of maize, beans, and the precious cacao beans, which were prized not only for consumption but also as currency. It is here that you can sense the vast expanse of Maya commerce, connecting various city-states across the Yucatan Peninsula and beyond. The Maya traded extensively, and their most coveted goods included cacao, jade, and obsidian, each one symbolizing something greater than simple economic value. Cacao, for example, was more than just a commodity for the Maya. It was sacred, intertwined with the gods, and used in both religious ceremonies and as a currency. Cacao beans were so valuable that they were often traded in exchange for goods or services, a form of currency that could be exchanged for almost anything. In addition to its value as currency, cacao also held ceremonial significance, used in sacred beverages prepared for rulers or in offerings to the gods. The Maya believed that cacao was a gift from the gods, a divine substance that connected the physical world to the spiritual. Picture yourself at a Maya banquet, sipping from a bowl filled with the frothy, dark liquid, thick with the taste of ground cacao, chili, and spices, an offering to the gods or perhaps consumed as part of a royal feast. Cacao was a mark of prestige, a gift fit for the elite and an essential part of Maya society. Jade, too, held deep spiritual significance for the Maya. This precious green stone was used to create intricate jewelry, ceremonial masks, and small figurines, all of which were believed to carry divine power. The Maya elite adorned themselves with jade, not just for its beauty but for its connection to the gods, associating the stone with fertility, life, and eternity. As you walk through the grand halls of a Maya temple, imagine the gleam of jade pieces reflecting the torchlight, perhaps worn by priests or placed as offerings at the feet of a statue of a god. The Maya did not just trade jade for its monetary value. It was traded as a means of connecting with the divine, a powerful symbol of life's continuity and prosperity. Obsidian, the volcanic glass used by the Maya for tools and weapons, was another key item in their trade network. Sharp and durable, obsidian was highly prized, and the Maya's skill in crafting it into tools, knives, and ceremonial blades gave them an advantage in both practical and ritual contexts. Obsidian was essential to Maya life, from its use in daily tools to its role in sacrificial ceremonies. The trade of obsidian flowed freely between Maya city-states and beyond, reaching other Mesoamerican cultures, and it played a vital role in the Maya's military and economic power. The sound of obsidian blades cutting through the air or the click of tools being crafted in Maya workshops would have filled the city, a constant reminder of the civilization's advanced craftsmanship and the value placed on this dark, glassy stone. Now, as you step away from the Maya world and into the domain of the Olmec, the landscape changes again. The air here is filled with the briny scent of the Gulf Coast, and as you walk along the shores, you find yourself at the edge of an Olmec trading hub. Unlike the Maya, who were known for their bustling, city-centered markets, the Olmec's trade networks were centered more around coastal trade routes and ceremonial centers. Here, goods were exchanged, but the focus was slightly different. While the Maya traded heavily in cacao, jade, and obsidian, the Olmec primarily traded in items like jade, rubber, and even pottery, items that were both practical and symbolic. Jade was as highly prized by the Olmec as it was by the Maya, though the Olmec's use of the stone was slightly more restrained. The Olmec crafted beautiful jade figurines, beads, and other ornaments, often using the stone in ritual contexts. For the Olmec, jade was connected to fertility and the supernatural, and its use in their art and ceremonies was symbolic of life's mysteries and the divine. The importance of jade in Olmec culture cannot be overstated. It was a material so precious that it was used to create objects meant to carry spiritual power. As you look at the carved jade figurines in an Olmec ceremonial center, you can almost feel the connection to the gods. The jade pieces were not just art, but powerful objects that ensured the people's continued favor. Another key product traded by the Olmec was rubber, a product of the rubber trees that grew along the Gulf Coast. Rubber, derived from the latex sap of these trees, was highly valued for its flexibility and waterproof properties. The Olmec used rubber to create ceremonial ball games, where they would bounce a rubber ball, representing the forces of life and death in their rituals. This game, later adopted by other Mesoamerican cultures, was an important social and ceremonial event. Rubber was also traded between the Olmec and their neighbors, becoming one of their most unique exports. The sound of a rubber ball bouncing against a stone court, the rhythm of the game, would have echoed through Olmec ceremonial centers as both a form of sport and a spiritual ritual. Despite the differences in the goods traded, both the Maya and the Olmec relied heavily on their trade networks for prosperity. The exchange of jade, cacao, obsidian, and rubber allowed these civilizations to flourish, creating not only economic wealth but also cultural connections. The trade routes, whether they ran through dense jungles or along the Gulf Coast, were lifelines for these ancient societies, connecting them to other cultures across Mesoamerica. As you leave behind the marketplaces of the Maya and the ceremonial hubs of the Olmec, the impact of their trade becomes clear. As we step back from the bustling marketplaces and ceremonial centers, the air around us begins to feel heavier, filled with the weight of history's less pleasant truths. Both the Maya and the Olmec civilizations were once thriving powerhouses, rich in culture, knowledge, and resources. Yet, over time, these great societies experienced significant changes, leading to the collapse of the Olmec and the eventual decline of the Maya. As we explore the contrasting fates of these two civilizations, we delve into the environmental and social factors that influence their trajectories, leaving behind questions that continue to intrigue historians and archaeologists alike. To begin, imagine yourself once again in the heart of the dense jungle that surrounded the Maya city-states. It's a warm, humid day, and the vibrant sounds of the rainforest seem to echo with life. Yet, as you walk through the streets of one of the once great Maya cities, you begin to notice signs of wear and tear. Some of the temples are overgrown with vines, and the marketplace is quieter than it once was. The Maya, whose society had flourished for centuries, were now facing challenges that would ultimately lead to the collapse of many of their great cities. The decline of the Maya civilization is often attributed to a combination of environmental, social, and political factors. The first of these is environmental degradation. As the Maya population grew, so did their demands on the land. The slash-and-burn agricultural techniques that had served them well for centuries began to take a toll on the soil. The once fertile land, rich with maize and beans, became increasingly depleted, and the rains that were so vital to the crops grew less predictable. Imagine the dry, cracked earth beneath your feet as you walk through a field that was once lush and productive, now struggling to yield the crops needed to feed the people. The Maya relied heavily on a complex system of agriculture, and the failure to maintain the delicate balance of the ecosystem was one of the key factors that led to their downfall. Deforestation, soil erosion, and the exhaustion of agricultural land weakened their ability to sustain their growing population. Additionally, the Maya's reliance on the water supply, often sourced from cenotes and rivers, was also affected by environmental changes. Water scarcity became a pressing issue as these vital sources dried up or became contaminated. The once thriving cities began to feel the strain, with some of them experiencing famine, social unrest, and eventual abandonment. However, environmental factors alone do not account for the collapse of the Maya civilization. Political instability played a significant role. The Maya civilization was composed of numerous city-states, each with its own ruler and governing structure. These city-states were often in competition with one another, vying for resources, power, and territory. Frequent warfare between city-states drained the resources needed for survival and further destabilized the region. Rulers, who had once been seen as divine figures capable of maintaining harmony between the gods and the people, were now faced with challenges they could not overcome. As the political and social systems crumbled, so too did the infrastructure that had once supported Maya society. Now, shift your focus from the jungle of the Maya to the coastal plains of the Olmec. The warm, salty air and the sound of the waves crashing on the shore provide a sharp contrast to the dense, overgrown jungle of the Maya world. Yet, as you approach one of the Olmec ceremonial centers, you begin to notice the telltale signs of decline. The once thriving centers, dotted with the imposing colossal heads, are now empty. The monumental stone figures still stand, but there is no longer the same bustle of activity around them. It's quiet. The Olmec, unlike the Maya, did not experience a dramatic, sudden collapse. Instead, their civilization faded gradually, with little fanfare. The decline of the Olmec is often attributed to a combination of environmental shifts and social changes. Much like the Maya, the Olmec relied heavily on their environment for sustenance. The coastal region where they lived, though rich in resources, was also vulnerable to natural disasters. Flooding, rising sea levels, and environmental degradation likely contributed to the decline of their agricultural systems. Imagine the shores where the Olmec once fished and farmed, now battered by storms and shifting tides. The fertile lands that once supported their cities began to lose their capacity to provide for their people. As the environment changed, so too did the Olmec way of life. But environmental challenges were not the only factors in the Olmec's fading power. Social and political instability also played a role in the decline of the Olmec civilization. The Olmec were a highly centralized society, with a powerful elite ruling over the common people. However, as the region became more prone to natural disasters and the availability of resources decreased, tensions likely arose within society. The elites, who had once been able to maintain control, may have struggled to adapt to the changing circumstances. The complex networks of trade and cultural exchange that had once fueled Olmec prosperity began to deteriorate, and with it, the central authority that had kept their society intact. Unlike the Maya, who faced frequent warfare between city-states, the Olmec decline seems to have been less violent but equally disruptive. The collapse of their urban centers, coupled with environmental challenges, led to the gradual disappearance of the Olmec as a dominant force in Mesoamerica. Despite these challenges, the Olmec were not entirely lost to history. Their cultural influence endured long after their decline. The Olmec are often referred to as the mother culture of Mesoamerica because their art, architecture, and religious practices influenced many of the civilizations that came after them, including the Maya, the Aztecs, and the Zapotecs. The colossal heads, which have become symbols of Olmec culture, still stand as silent witnesses to the rise and fall of one of Mesoamerica's most mysterious civilizations. In contrast to the Olmec, the Maya, while experiencing periods of decline, were ultimately able to adapt to their environment and social changes. Their cities, though abandoned, were not entirely lost. The knowledge of astronomy, architecture, and agriculture that the Maya developed continued to influence the region long after their city-states collapsed. The Maya legacy lived on, not just in the ruins of their cities, but in the cultural and intellectual achievements that would influence later Mesoamerican civilizations. As the sun sets behind the jagged peaks of the Maya city-states, a calm quiet falls over the jungle. The air cools, and the last light of day shimmers off the ancient stonework of the temples and palaces. In this peaceful atmosphere, your gaze shifts to the intricate murals that adorn the walls of these grand structures. The Maya were not just master architects and astronomers, they were also highly skilled artists, and their art reflected the depth of their civilization's cultural and spiritual life. As you stand before one of these vivid murals, the scene unfurls before you. Bright colors dance across the walls, reds, blues, yellows, and greens, depicting scenes from both daily life and mythological narratives. You can almost hear the rustling of the tropical leaves in the background as the figures come to life in front of you. The artists have captured the movements of people engaged in sacred rituals, the workings of the fields, and the divine figures who watched over the Maya people. These murals were not just decorative, they were a means of recording history, telling stories, and communicating with the gods. The Maya painted their temples and palaces with scenes that represented their cosmic beliefs, their rulers, and their gods. The murals in places like Bonampak, one of the most famous Maya sites for mural art, tell the story of a powerful ruling family, their divine right to rule, and their connection to the gods. The figures in these murals, often rendered with great detail and realism, are not just symbolic, they are representations of the Mayas' everyday lives, woven into a tapestry of divine order. The Maya were keen observers of the natural world, and their art was often filled with intricate depictions of animals, plants, and celestial bodies. Every stroke of paint was part of a larger narrative, where history, religion, and politics intersected. In addition to murals, the Maya were also skilled in the creation of pottery, sculptures, and jade jewelry, all of which reflected their artistic and spiritual values. The intricate designs on their pottery told stories about the gods, the cosmos, and the rulers who led them. Maya sculptures, often crafted from stone, depicted gods, rulers, and mythological figures, and were designed not only for aesthetic value but also for ritual purposes. The Maya understood the power of art to connect the spiritual and physical worlds, and their artistic legacy remains one of the most refined in all of Mesoamerica. Now, as you step away from the bright murals of the Maya and walk toward the coastal plains of the Olmec, the atmosphere shifts. Here, the humid air is tinged with the scent of salt water and earth, and the landscape feels open, expansive. Unlike the Maya, whose art was primarily about detailed depictions of their world, the Olmec's art was more symbolic and enigmatic. The Olmec, often regarded as the mother culture of Mesoamerica, left behind an art style that was not as immediately accessible as the vibrant murals of the Maya, but no less powerful. The Olmec's art was marked by its mystery, and the monumental sculptures they created continue to intrigue scholars today. The most iconic of the Olmec artistic achievements are the colossal heads, massive, lifelike stone carvings that stand watch over their ceremonial centers. These heads, often weighing several tons, represent powerful figures, likely rulers, and are thought to embody the strength and authority of the Olmec elite. The faces of the heads are characterized by their broad noses, full lips, and heavy brows, features that are exaggerated to emphasize the power and stature of the individuals they represent. These colossal sculptures are not only an artistic feat, but also a symbol of the Olmec's deep connection to leadership and spirituality. The Olmec also created smaller-scale sculptures, such as jaguar figures and ceremonial masks, which were imbued with symbolic meaning. The jaguar, for example, was a recurring motif in Olmec art, representing power, strength, and the connection between the human and animal realms. These small sculptures were often crafted from jade, a material that had great spiritual significance for the Olmec, and were used in rituals and ceremonies. Unlike the Maya, who painted their stories on walls, the Olmec's art was often more abstract, focusing on forms and symbols rather than detailed narrative depictions. The Olmec's artistic legacy is also seen in their pottery, which, though not as renowned as their stone sculptures, was still highly significant. Olmec pottery often featured human faces, animals, and geometric patterns, and like their other art forms, these objects were imbued with spiritual significance. The Olmec pottery was used in everyday life, but it also played a role in religious and ceremonial contexts. It is believed that the Olmec used their art as a means of communicating with the gods, offering symbolic representations of the divine in their sculptures and pottery. While the Maya art focused heavily on storytelling and the recording of history, the Olmec art was more focused on symbolism and power. The Olmec left behind fewer detailed narrative works, but their monumental stone sculptures and smaller figurines were equally important in expressing their worldview. The Olmec were not interested in simply depicting the world around them. They sought to create art that was infused with spiritual power, marking the world as one where the divine and the human were constantly intertwined. Both the Maya and the Olmec left us with art that tells the story of their civilizations, but in very different ways. The Maya art is vibrant, filled with narrative detail, and deeply tied to their religious and political life. The Olmec, on the other hand, created art that was more abstract, monumental, and symbolic, focused on the power of their rulers and the spiritual forces they believed controlled their lives. The art of the Maya and Olmec civilizations, though differing in style and execution, both served as vehicles for expressing the complex interplay between the earthly and the divine, the rulers and the gods, the living and the dead. The air grows cooler as you enter a quiet, sacred space. The sounds of the bustling world around you fade, replaced by the soft, distant hum of a ritual. It is here, in this quiet moment, that the significance of death and the afterlife in the ancient Maya and Olmec civilizations becomes palpable. Both societies, like so many cultures across the world, placed immense importance on the journey from life to death, believing that the passage to the afterlife was just as significant as life itself. Though their burial practices differed in style and symbolism, the reverence each culture had for the dead and their preparation for the afterlife were central to their spiritual and social order. Let us first step into the world of the Maya, where the burial practices were deeply intertwined with their beliefs about the cosmos, the gods, and the cycles of life and death. Imagine yourself standing in front of a Maya tomb, located within the confines of a sacred pyramid or beneath the grand steps of a temple. The air is thick with incense and the scent of flowers, offerings placed on the tomb's altar. The Maya believed that death was not an end, but a transition, and they carefully prepared their dead for this journey to the afterlife. The Maya tombs were elaborate, often built within or near the temples that served as the connection between the human and divine realms. Some of the most famous examples of Maya burial practices have been uncovered in the tombs of rulers, whose burial chambers were lavishly adorned with treasures, jade jewelry, ceramic offerings, and intricately carved stones. These items were placed in the tomb to ensure that the deceased would be well provided for in the afterlife. The Maya believed that the gods required offerings in the form of food, jewels, and other precious items, and thus these goods accompanied the deceased to help them navigate the underworld and find favor with the gods. Royal Maya burials, such as those discovered in sites like Tikal and Palenque, often involve placing the deceased in a seated or supine position, surrounded by offerings that included finely crafted pottery, jade ornaments, and even the bones of animals. In some cases, the tombs of rulers were filled with the remains of servants or family members, believed to accompany the ruler into the afterlife, acting as attendants who would continue to serve the king in death. The tombs were often sealed with large stone slabs, ensuring that the spirit of the deceased was protected and could pass safely into the next world. The most famous Maya burial, that of the tomb of Pacal the Great in Palenque, is a testament to the importance of the afterlife for the elite. Pacal's tomb was filled with treasures and intricately carved stone, and his burial chamber was designed to represent his journey into the afterlife. The imagery surrounding Pacal's tomb features symbols of the underworld, a realm the Maya believed was ruled by gods and spirits who could either bring prosperity or misfortune to the living. The tomb's design, with its clear astronomical alignments and symbolic carvings, reflected the Maya's deep belief that the journey to the afterlife was just as important as life itself. In contrast, the Olmec burial practices were different, yet no less significant. The Olmec, as the mother culture of Mesoamerica, left behind their own unique legacy in the way they honored the dead. Picture yourself standing in an Olmec ceremonial center, where massive stone heads and smaller sculptures mark the landscape. Here, the burial practices of the Olmec, though more enigmatic, carry with them powerful symbols and deep spiritual meanings. Unlike the Maya, the Olmec did not build elaborate pyramidal tombs for their dead. Instead, their burials were often simpler, though no less rich in meaning. The Olmec buried their dead in shallow graves, sometimes placing them in tombs beneath large ceremonial mounds. The grave goods that accompanied the deceased were often symbolic, with items such as jade figurines, ceremonial masks, and the bones of animals placed within the burial sites. These offerings were meant to ensure that the deceased had the strength and protection they needed to navigate the afterlife. Perhaps one of the most intriguing aspects of Olmec burial practices was their use of jade. The Olmec, like the Maya, considered jade to be a powerful material that connected the living to the divine. The jade figurines and masks found in Olmec tombs were not just artistic expressions, but spiritual symbols meant to guide the deceased through the journey of the afterlife. The jade objects were placed strategically in the burial to ensure that the deceased would have the protection and guidance of the gods. The Olmec, like the Maya, also practiced a form of ancestor worship, in which the dead were believed to continue to influence the lives of the living. As you walk through the Olmec Ceremonial Center, you can almost feel the presence of the ancestors in the stone sculptures and the placement of burial offerings. The Olmec people may not have had the same elaborate tombs as the Maya, but their respect for the dead and their belief in the continued influence of the deceased on the living was just as profound. The Olmecs' belief in the power of the dead was reflected in their art, their burial practices, and the ceremonial objects they left behind. What stands out between the Maya and Olmec burial practices is the different ways in which they approach death. The Maya focused heavily on the transition from life to the afterlife, using complex rituals, offerings, and architectural structures to ensure the safe passage of the deceased. Their royal tombs, filled with wealth and sacred symbols, reflect their belief in the continuity of life and the importance of maintaining a connection with the divine even after death. The Olmec, on the other hand, while still placing importance on the afterlife, had a different relationship with their dead. Their simpler burial practices, though rich in symbolism, were focused more on ensuring that the deceased had the spiritual strength to interact with the divine, rather than on elaborate tombs or royal legacies. Their use of jade and ceremonial masks suggests a deep reverence for the gods and ancestors, but without the same grand architectural markers of the Maya. Both the Maya and Olmec civilizations shared the belief that the dead continued to influence the living, and both invested heavily in their burial practices. Whether through the grandeur of Maya tombs or the symbolism of Olmec burials, these cultures demonstrated a profound respect for the dead and their connection to the divine. As you journey through the ancient cities of the Maya and the Olmec, you notice the faint echoes of powerful yet often overlooked figures, women. In both of these great Mesoamerican civilizations, women held significant roles in society, not just as family members or caregivers, but as influential figures in religion, governance, and even warfare. While the exact nature of their roles varied between the two cultures, the contributions of women in both the Maya and Olmec worlds were deeply woven into the fabric of their respective societies, even if the historical records often focus more on the actions of men. Let's begin by stepping into the world of the Maya, a civilization that, though often perceived through the lens of its male rulers and elite classes, had a rich and multifaceted role for women. The Maya were not a monolithic society but a collection of city-states, each with its own complex social and political structures. Yet, across these various states, one theme remained constant: the significance of women in the spiritual, social, and even political spheres. Imagine yourself walking through a grand Maya city-state, perhaps Copan, with its beautiful ball courts and towering pyramids. Here, in the ceremonial center, you can hear the soft whispers of the wind rustling through the tree canopy, and the subtle rhythm of the daily life of the Maya hums in the background. Among the bustling crowds, you come upon a ruler's wife or a female priestess, whose power, though often not as visible as her male counterparts, was no less significant. In many cases, women were involved in the most sacred rituals, acting as spiritual leaders who would oversee ceremonies, such as the birth or death of a ruler, that were critical for maintaining the balance between the gods and the people. Women in the Maya civilization often held titles of great importance. Some of the most powerful figures in Maya history were women who ruled in their own right, even acting as sovereigns of entire city-states. Perhaps one of the most notable female rulers of the Maya was Lady Kabul, the queen of the Maya city of Calakmul. Lady Kabul was not simply a consort to a male ruler. She was an influential political figure who wielded real power and played a key role in the military campaigns of her city. Her importance is attested to by the fact that her tomb was lavishly adorned with jade and other precious offerings, marking her as a ruler of significant stature. Women also played critical roles in religion, particularly as priestesses. In Maya society, the religious calendar was central to daily life, and women were often involved in maintaining the ceremonies tied to this cycle. They might preside over rituals that invoked rain or ensured the success of the harvest, offering sacrifices and leading prayers to the gods. These women, who had a direct connection to the divine, were seen as powerful figures who held the balance of the cosmos in their hands. Additionally, many of the deities in the Maya pantheon were female, or had strong female attributes, further cementing the importance of women in religious life. But the role of women in the Maya world was not confined only to the temples or the courts. Women were also responsible for many of the tasks that ensured the functioning of Maya society, from managing households and weaving textiles to working the fields. The domestic sphere, while often overlooked in historical accounts, was of critical importance to the Maya, and women were the heart of it. Their contributions to both the family and the broader community allowed the Maya civilization to thrive, even as their male counterparts governed and waged wars. Now, as you move to the coastal plains of the Olmec world, you step into a different atmosphere. The humid air smells faintly of salt and earth, and the land stretches out in open plains, dotted with the mysterious heads of the Olmec rulers. While the Olmec left behind fewer written records than the Maya, archaeological evidence suggests that women in Olmec society also held important roles, though in a more spiritual and symbolic capacity. The Olmec, unlike the Maya, did not have prominent female rulers or warrior queens, but women were still highly revered within their religious framework. In the Olmec world, women were likely seen as powerful spiritual figures, closely connected to the earth, fertility, and the forces of nature. The Olmec civilization had a complex pantheon of gods, and many of these deities had female aspects. The goddess of fertility, for example, was central to Olmec religious beliefs, and women were associated with the life-giving forces of the earth. Women in Olmec society were often portrayed in their art as representations of fertility, motherhood, and the natural world. Their depictions on Olmec pottery and figurines often emphasize their connection to the earth and the divine, suggesting that they played a central role in the cultural and spiritual life of their community. Though the Olmec did not have documented female rulers like the Maya, women's roles in the household and in religious rituals were crucial. In Olmec society, women likely worked alongside men in agriculture and craft production, though their work may have been focused more on the domestic and spiritual aspects of life. There is evidence to suggest that women were also involved in the performance of rituals, perhaps as priestesses or spiritual leaders. The Olmec ceremonial centers, with their elaborate offerings and symbolic objects, suggest that women may have played key roles in the religious ceremonies that were so vital to the society's functioning. One of the key symbols of Olmec art is the jaguar, a powerful and mysterious creature that was often associated with both male and female deities. It's possible that women in Olmec society, like the jaguar, were seen as embodying a form of spiritual power, both nurturing and fierce, capable of connecting with the divine forces of nature. The presence of women in Olmec art as symbolic figures of fertility and spiritual authority suggests that their roles, while different from the Maya, were no less significant in the religious and social fabric of their culture. While the Olmec did not have female rulers or warriors in the same sense as the Maya, The reverence for women in their religious and spiritual life cannot be overstated. The Olmec recognized the power of women as keepers of fertility, life, and spiritual balance. Though their contributions may not have been as directly political as those of the Maya queens, they were no less central to the survival and prosperity of the Olmec society. As you journey further into the heart of ancient Mesoamerica, you find yourself on the edge of two very different landscapes: the dense jungles of the Maya world and the open plains of the Olmec civilization. These contrasting environments not only shaped the lives of the people who lived there but also influenced their military strategies and tactics. Both the Maya and the Olmec were societies that understood the importance of defense and conquest, yet their approaches to warfare reflected their unique environmental challenges and cultural priorities. First, imagine yourself deep within the heart of the Maya civilization. The thick, humid jungle seems to swallow you whole, the vibrant sounds of the forest filling the air. You walk through a city-state, perhaps in the heart of the Yucatan Peninsula, where large stone temples rise above the treetops. These temples were not just religious structures, they were symbols of power and control, and their very existence was tied to the military strategies of the Maya. Warfare was an essential part of life for the Maya, who were not a unified empire but a collection of city-states that often competed for resources, land, and political dominance. As you wander through the plaza, you might hear the distant sounds of warriors preparing for battle, sharpening their obsidian blades, and donning their elaborate feathered armor. The Maya were adept at fighting within their environment. The jungle, with its thick underbrush and challenging terrain, made traditional forms of warfare difficult, so the Maya adapted their strategies to take advantage of their surroundings. Their military tactics often involved ambushes and surprise attacks, using the dense jungle to conceal their movements. They would often launch raids on rival city-states, attacking from unexpected directions and quickly disappearing back into the forest, making it difficult for their enemies to retaliate effectively. These guerrilla tactics allowed the Maya to remain powerful in the region, even as their city-states fought against each other. While the Maya were skilled in defensive warfare, they were also well practiced in sieging enemy cities. When attacking, the Maya often focused on disrupting the infrastructure of their rivals, including cutting off access to water supplies and other vital resources. They understood that warfare was not just about direct confrontation but about wearing down the enemy through prolonged pressure. The Maya also used their knowledge of fortifications and city planning to their advantage. Some Maya cities were built with defensive walls or other barriers to protect against invasions, though these were less common than the fortified cities of other ancient civilizations. Beyond the battlefield, the Maya also used warfare as a way to assert political and religious power. Capturing prisoners during warfare was a central aspect of Maya military strategy. Prisoners were often taken for ritual sacrifice, with the belief that their blood would appease the gods and ensure the prosperity of the city-state. This practice was a clear demonstration of the Maya's deep connection between warfare and religion. The captured enemies were seen as symbols of the triumph of the city-state's divine ruler, further solidifying his authority. For the Maya, victory in battle was not just a military achievement, it was a spiritual one, reinforcing their relationship with the gods. Now let's step away from the dense jungle of the Maya world and imagine yourself on the wide, open plains of the Olmec civilization. The warm breeze carries the scent of salt water, and the landscape is dotted with the massive stone heads of the Olmec. Here, in contrast to the Maya's reliance on stealth and surprise, the Olmec employed a different approach to warfare, one more closely tied to their role as the mother culture of Mesoamerica. The Olmec, though not as militarily aggressive as the Maya, understood the need to defend their territory and maintain their dominance in the region. Unlike the Maya, the Olmec did not engage in large-scale territorial wars between city-states. Instead, their military activities were more centered around defense and the control of key trade routes. The Olmec lived in a region where resources, particularly rubber, jade, and agricultural products, were valuable to neighboring cultures. They understood that controlling these resources meant controlling the region, and they fortified their ceremonial centers to protect their wealth. The Olmec built their ceremonial centers in strategic locations, often near water sources and trade routes, allowing them to control access to essential resources. The Olmec military, unlike the Maya, did not rely on complex siege warfare or large-scale invasions. Instead, their tactics focused on protecting their trade routes and key ceremonial centers. There is evidence to suggest that the Olmec used their art and symbolism to intimidate potential invaders. The colossal stone heads that dot the landscape may have served as a reminder of the Olmec's power and influence, representing a culture that had both the spiritual and physical strength to protect its territory. The sheer size of these statues, which can stand up to 10 feet tall and weigh several tons, reflects the magnitude of their political and spiritual presence. The Olmec may not have had a standing army like the Maya, but they relied on their political and religious symbolism to assert dominance and deter invaders. In contrast to the Maya, who were deeply involved in territorial conquest and expansion, the Olmec's military efforts appear to have been more about maintaining control over their cultural and economic centers. The Olmec were more focused on maintaining their role as a spiritual and trade hub, ensuring that their influence spread through peaceful trade and cultural exchange rather than through military conquest. This focus on trade as a form of power and defense allowed the Olmec to exert influence over a wide region, without engaging in the same kind of militaristic expansionism seen in the Maya world. While the Olmec may not have engaged in the same level of warfare as the Maya, their understanding of defense and strategic positioning allowed them to maintain their dominance in the region. The Olmec used their ceremonial centers as both spiritual and political strongholds, a means of ensuring that their influence remained intact. Their military tactics, while not as aggressive as those of the Maya, were still highly effective in protecting their culture and maintaining their status as the dominant force in early Mesoamerica. As the sun begins to dip below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the ancient world, you stand on the precipice of two powerful legacies: the enduring influence of the Maya and the enigmatic contributions of the Olmec. These civilizations, though separated by time, geography, and culture, have both left profound marks on the world. As you reflect on the complexities of their achievements, their innovations in mathematics, astronomy, art, and governance, you begin to understand how the seeds they planted have flourished through time. The legacy of both the Maya and Olmec is alive today, shaping modern culture and thought in ways that are often more subtle than we might realize. Let us begin with the Maya, a civilization whose contributions to mathematics, astronomy, and writing continue to influence the world today. As you stand before the remnants of a grand Maya pyramid, you are reminded of their unparalleled achievements in science and knowledge. The Maya were among the first to develop an advanced understanding of the cosmos, using their vast knowledge of the stars to inform everything from agricultural practices to the timing of religious rituals. Their sophisticated understanding of the universe led them to create one of the most accurate calendars in human history, the Maya-long count calendar, which tracked the passage of time over thousands of years. The Maya were also pioneers in the field of mathematics. They were among the first civilizations to use the concept of zero, a revolutionary idea that would later shape the development of modern mathematics. The Maya number system, based on a vigesimal, base 20 system, allowed them to calculate complex astronomical cycles and to predict solar and lunar eclipses with remarkable precision. The use of zero, which was largely unknown to other ancient cultures, opened the door to a new level of mathematical understanding, one that would be essential to the development of modern mathematics and science. In addition to their mathematical and astronomical achievements, the Maya also developed a sophisticated writing system. The Maya script, known as hieroglyphs, combined logograms, symbols representing words, and syllabic symbols, creating a complex system of written communication. The Maya used this script to record historical events, genealogies, and religious texts on stone monuments, pottery, and codices made from bark paper. These texts provide us with a window into the Maya world, offering insight into their social, political, and religious life. Though much of the Maya script remains undeciphered, scholars continue to unlock its secrets, revealing a rich literary tradition that was among the most advanced in the ancient world. Beyond their intellectual achievements, the Maya also left a cultural legacy that endures today. Their art, with its vivid depictions of gods, rulers, and mythological beings, continues to inspire artists and scholars alike. The Maya also made significant contributions to architecture, with their imposing pyramids, palaces, and temples serving as testaments to their engineering prowess. The Maya built cities that were not only centers of power and religion but also hubs of trade, culture, and knowledge. Even today, their ruins, like those at Tikal, Palenque, and Copan, continue to awe visitors and remind us of the grandeur of Maya civilization. Now let us shift our gaze to the Olmec, the so-called mother culture of Mesoamerica. Though their civilization was more fleeting in comparison to the Maya, the Olmec's legacy is no less profound. The Olmec were the first civilization in Mesoamerica to establish a large-scale society, laying the foundations for the cultures that would follow. The Olmec are credited with creating the first monumental stone sculptures in the region. Colossal heads, some weighing as much as 40 tons, each one a powerful representation of the rulers or gods who held sway over Olmec society. These massive stone heads, though often seen as symbols of power, also represent the Olmec's deep connection to leadership and spirituality. The Olmec's influence extends far beyond their monumental art. They are believed to have pioneered many of the cultural practices that would later be adopted by other Mesoamerican civilizations, including the Maya. One of their most significant contributions was the creation of the Mesoamerican ball game, a ritualistic sport that became central to many cultures in the region, from the Olmec to the Aztecs. The game, which involved a rubber ball and was often played in large, open courts, was not just a form of entertainment, but a spiritual practice, symbolizing the cosmic struggle between life and death. The Olmec also developed early forms of writing and calendrical systems that would later influence the Maya and other Mesoamerican cultures. Perhaps the most important aspect of the Olmec legacy lies in their role as the cultural and spiritual predecessors to the great civilizations of Mesoamerica. The Olmec were the first to establish the cultural foundations for the rise of the Maya, the Zapotecs, and the Aztecs. Their art, religion, and social organization were adopted and adapted by these later cultures, ensuring the continued influence of the Olmec long after their decline. The Olmec are often seen as the first civilizers of Mesoamerica, and their influence can be seen in the art, architecture, and religious practices of the civilizations that followed. Though the Olmec civilization itself faded into obscurity, their impact on the development of Mesoamerican culture cannot be overstated. Their innovations in art, religion, and society laid the groundwork for the more famous cultures that followed. The Olmec may not have left behind the same vast cities or intellectual achievements as the Maya, but their influence on the course of Mesoamerican history is undeniable. The world around you seems to quiet as you step into the heart of ancient intellectual achievement. Imagine yourself standing before the stone carvings of a Maya temple, the intricate glyphs etched into the surface telling stories from a time long past. These writings, though weathered by time, still hold within them the secrets of an ancient civilization, the Maya, whose contributions to written language and record-keeping remain some of the most sophisticated in the ancient world. In this segment, we will delve into the contrasting writing systems of the Maya and the Olmec, examining how their unique approaches to writing shaped their cultures and left lasting legacies. In the bustling cities of the Maya civilization, the role of writing was crucial to maintaining order, recording history, and communicating with the gods. As you walk through the ancient city, you might come upon a stela or a monument, its surface covered with intricate symbols, Maya hieroglyphs, each one representing a word or syllable. The Maya writing system was one of the most advanced in pre-Columbian Mesoamerica, and its development was influenced by the need for a means of recording political events, royal lineages, and religious rituals. These inscriptions, carved on stone monuments, pottery, and codices made from bark paper, often depicted scenes of royal power, military conquests, and the divine right of rulers. The Maya hieroglyphic script is a complex system that combined both logograms, symbols representing words, and syllabic symbols, representing sounds. This system allowed the Maya to write down their language with remarkable precision. Picture the symbols carefully carved into the surface of a stone monument, each one telling a different part of the story. The glyphs were not just functional. They were artistic expressions, designed to honor the gods and record the greatness of the Maya rulers. One of the most famous examples of Maya writing is the inscription at the tomb of Pakal the Great, ruler of Palenque. This inscription not only records the king's lineage and deeds but also reflects the Maya belief in the divine right of rulers and their connection to the gods. The Maya used their script for a variety of purposes: to document political events, to commemorate victories, and to record religious rituals. The inscriptions found on their stelae, for example, are often a mixture of dates, names, and ceremonial practices, many of which were timed according to their sophisticated calendar systems. The Maya calendar itself, one of the most accurate of its time, was used to track both the cycles of the natural world and the movements of the celestial bodies, and their written language played a key role in this process. The written word in Maya society was not just for communication. It was a vital tool in shaping the spiritual and political life of the city-state. Yet, while the Maya developed one of the most intricate and comprehensive writing systems in the Americas, the Olmec approach to writing was far less complex, at least as far as we understand it today. The Olmec civilization, though influential, did not develop a fully fledged written language in the same way the Maya did. Instead, the Olmec used a system of symbols, many of which were likely used in ceremonial and religious contexts. Picture yourself in an Olmec ceremonial center, surrounded by the colossal stone heads and smaller figurines that represent the powerful forces of the earth and the divine. Carved into some of these statues and objects are symbols, simple yet striking, likely used to represent important concepts or ideas, such as gods, celestial events, or royal figures. While the Olmec did not develop a comprehensive written language like the Maya, they did create a set of symbols that have been interpreted by scholars as the beginnings of a writing system. Some of these symbols appear on stone monuments and artifacts, and while their meanings are still debated, it is clear that the Olmec understood the importance of visual communication and symbolism. The Olmec script, though not as fully developed as the Mayas, is believed to have influenced later Mesoamerican civilizations, including the Zapotecs and the Maya. In fact, some of the glyphs used by the Olmec appear to have been precursors to the more complex writing systems that would later be developed by the Maya and other cultures in the region. The Olmec's use of symbols was not just a means of recording language, but also a form of spiritual communication. Their art, including the massive stone heads, often contained these symbols, linking their rulers and gods to the natural world. These images were not just representations. They were seen as carrying power, capable of influencing the forces of the universe. The Olmec believed that the rulers, as intermediaries between the gods and the people, could harness this power through the symbols they used in art and ritual. While the Olmec writing system was not as developed or widespread as the Mayas, Their use of symbols set the foundation for later Mesoamerican civilizations to build upon. The Olmec may have lacked the extensive written records of the Maya, but their influence on the development of writing in Mesoamerica cannot be underestimated. The glyphs, though simple, represent the beginning of a tradition of using written symbols to communicate not only practical information but also spiritual and political ideas. In the end, the Maya's writing system became one of the most sophisticated and enduring aspects of their culture. Their ability to record history, time, and divine will in a system of symbols remains a testament to their intellectual achievements. The Olmec, on the other hand, laid the groundwork for the development of writing in Mesoamerica. Their use of symbols to represent ideas, gods, and rulers was the precursor to the more advanced systems that would follow. As you reflect on these two approaches to writing, the complex and intricate Maya hieroglyphs and the symbolic yet powerful Olmec script, you begin to understand the deep connection between language, power, and spirituality in ancient Mesoamerica. Both civilizations recognized the importance of symbols, whether for recording history or communicating with the gods, and their legacy in the written word continues to influence the world today. As the evening settles over the ancient civilizations of the Maya and the Olmec, you are drawn to another realm of their societies, one that deals with the essential and intimate aspects of human life, health, and wellness. Both the Maya and Olmec, though separated by time and geography, shared a deep understanding of the human body and its connection to the spiritual world. In their healing practices, they merged the physical with the spiritual, recognizing that illness was not merely a bodily affliction but a reflection of imbalances in the forces of nature, the gods, and society. Let us first step into the world of the Maya, whose healing practices were as complex and varied as their civilization itself. In the bustling cities of the Maya, where towering pyramids rose above the jungle, life and death were intimately tied to the health of the individual, the community, and the natural world. The Maya did not rely on simple remedies alone. Their approach to wellness was holistic, incorporating physical, spiritual, and psychological elements. Health was viewed through a lens that was deeply intertwined with the natural and supernatural worlds. Imagine yourself entering the humble dwelling of a Maya healer, perhaps in the ancient city of Copan. The air is thick with the soothing scent of herbs and incense, a mixture of copal and the earthy aroma of freshly crushed plants. The healer, a wise elder who has spent years studying the natural world, prepares various potions and balms from the abundant plant life around her. The Maya were skilled in herbal medicine, using plants such as cacao, tobacco, and a variety of jungle plants to treat ailments ranging from headaches to digestive issues. These natural remedies were not merely physical treatments but were infused with spiritual significance. For the Maya, illness was often seen as a punishment or a sign of disharmony between the individual and the gods. A common belief was that sickness resulted from an imbalance in the spiritual and physical realms, often caused by the intrusion of malevolent spirits or the anger of the gods. In such cases, the healer would perform a spiritual cleansing, using sacred rituals and offerings to restore balance. You might find the healer conducting a ceremony with rhythmic chanting, burning incense, and making offerings of food or flowers to the gods in exchange for healing. The Maya believed that by restoring harmony between the individual and the divine, they could bring health to the body and spirit. Beyond physical remedies, the Maya also recognized the importance of mental and emotional health. Shamans and spiritual leaders played an integral role in addressing psychological issues. For example, depression or anxiety was sometimes viewed as the result of spiritual imbalance or a disconnection from the gods. A shaman might guide an individual through a trance or vision quest, using hallucinogenic substances such as peyote or mushrooms to facilitate communication with the divine and heal the mind. These practices were not seen as mere rituals but as vital tools for reconnecting with the spiritual forces that governed the Maya world. Now, As you shift your focus from the lush jungles of the Maya to the coastal plains of the Olmec, the air carries the faint scent of brine, and the sound of the waves crashing on the shore provides a soothing backdrop. The Olmec, though they did not leave behind the same detailed records as the Maya, also had a profound understanding of health and healing, blending physical care with spiritual practices. Like the Maya, the Olmec viewed wellness as a delicate balance between the human body and the forces of nature, but their healing practices were shaped by their unique environment and spiritual beliefs. In the Olmec world, healers likely relied on a combination of herbal medicine, ritual, and spiritual guidance to maintain health. Much like the Maya, the Olmec believed that illness could be caused by an imbalance in the natural or spiritual world. The Olmec were particularly attuned to the forces of nature, and their healing practices were deeply connected to their religious beliefs. The jaguar, a central figure in Olmec mythology, was often associated with power, strength, and healing. It is likely that the Olmec viewed certain animals, plants, and natural elements as sacred, believing they held the power to heal and restore balance. The Olmec may have used herbs and natural remedies derived from the abundant plants around them. While the specific plants used by the Olmec are difficult to pinpoint, it is likely that they utilized similar herbs to those found in the Maya world, such as medicinal plants, roots, and bark. These plants would have been used to treat ailments like pain, digestive issues, and wounds. However, unlike the Maya, who had a more documented system of medical knowledge, the Olmec's healing practices seem to have been more intertwined with their religious rituals. The Olmec believed in the power of the gods to affect their health, and they likely relied on the guidance of spiritual leaders to restore balance to the body and spirit. One of the most intriguing aspects of Olmec healing practices was their connection to shamanistic practices. The Olmec, like many other Mesoamerican cultures, may have used hallucinogenic plants and substances to facilitate communication with the gods and spirits. Shamans or spiritual leaders likely played an important role in the healing process, guiding individuals through spiritual journeys to gain insight into the cause of their illness and to seek guidance from the divine. The use of such substances was deeply sacred and was seen as a means to access the spiritual world, where the answers to health problems could be found. While the Maya had a more developed system of written records on healing, the Olmec's legacy in medicine is still felt today. Their understanding of the spiritual and physical worlds influenced later cultures, including the Maya, who adopted and adapted many of the Olmec's practices. The Olmec's use of symbolism, particularly the connection between health and spiritual balance, can be seen in the way later Mesoamerican cultures approached wellness. Despite the differences in the specific healing practices of the Maya and Olmec, both civilizations shared a fundamental belief in the interconnectedness of the body, mind, and spirit. Healing was not just about curing physical ailments, but about restoring harmony with the natural and spiritual forces that govern their lives. Both the Maya and the Olmec viewed health as a sacred balance, one that required not only physical remedies but also spiritual guidance and rituals to maintain. As night begins to fall, you find yourself standing under a vast, open sky. The stars twinkle above, far removed from the noise of daily life, and a sense of quiet reverence fills the air. In the ancient Mesoamerican world, this night sky was not just a backdrop to human activity. It was an integral part of the cosmos, a sacred space that governed both the physical and spiritual realms. The Maya and Olmec, though separated by geography and time, shared a profound connection to the heavens, shaping their worldviews and understanding of life, death, and the forces of nature. Let us begin with the Maya, whose cosmology was rich, complex, and intricately tied to their everyday existence. The Maya believed that the universe was divided into three main realms: the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. Above them, the heavens were inhabited by gods and celestial beings, while the earth was the domain of humans, and the underworld, known as Xibalba, was the place of death and the afterlife. Imagine yourself walking through a Maya city-state, the jungle alive with sound around you. The towering pyramids and temples that rise from the jungle floor are not only monumental structures, they are symbols of the Mayas' connection to the cosmos, a physical manifestation of the sacred realms that governed their lives. The Maya believed that time was cyclical, and the movements of the stars, the moon, and the planets were not just physical phenomena but were linked to the spiritual and political aspects of their lives. They created highly accurate calendars to track the movements of these celestial bodies, aligning their rituals, agricultural practices, and even political decisions with the cosmic cycles. The most famous of these calendars is the Maya-long count, which tracked time over long periods, marking significant events in the cosmic and earthly realms. The movements of Venus, in particular, held special significance, as the Maya saw it as the embodiment of the god Kukulkan, the feathered serpent, and a powerful symbol of life and death. To the Maya, the stars were not just distant lights in the sky. They were divine beings whose movements reflected the cycles of life on Earth. The Mayas' belief in the interconnectedness of the cosmos is evident in their art, architecture, and rituals. The alignment of their cities and temples with celestial events was deliberate and intentional, linking their human world with the divine. The Maya saw themselves as participants in a grand cosmic drama, with their lives and actions directly influencing the balance of the universe. They believed that the actions of rulers, the performance of rituals, and even the planting of crops were part of a greater, divine order, and that failure to maintain harmony with the cosmos would result in chaos and disaster. Now, as the Maya's view of the cosmos unfolds before you, shift your gaze toward the Olmec, whose cosmological beliefs were also deeply intertwined with the natural and supernatural worlds. Though less documented than the Maya, the Olmec had a rich spiritual and religious framework that shaped their understanding of the universe. The Olmec, often referred to as the mother culture of Mesoamerica, laid the foundations for many of the cosmological concepts that would later be adopted by other Mesoamerican civilizations, including the Maya. In the Olmec world, the cosmos was viewed as a dynamic and ever-changing place, where the forces of nature, the gods, and the human realm were intricately connected. The Olmec believed in a world governed by cycles, particularly the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. Central to their cosmology was the belief in the power of natural elements, especially the jaguar, water, and maize. The jaguar, often depicted in Olmec art and sculpture, was considered a powerful symbol of the earth and the underworld, associated with both life and death. The jaguar's strength and mystique represented the forces of the cosmos that could both nurture and destroy. Water, too, played a crucial role in Olmec cosmology. The Olmec lived near the Gulf Coast, where rivers and rainfall were essential for their survival. Water was not just a physical necessity but a sacred element, believed to be the source of life and fertility. The Olmec likely viewed water as a link between the human and spiritual worlds, a means of communication with the gods. The Olmec's use of ceremonial centers, often built near rivers or water sources, reflects their belief in the divine power of water, connecting their sacred rituals with the life-giving forces of nature. Maize, the central crop of Mesoamerica, was another key element in the Olmec's cosmological understanding. The Olmec, like the Maya, recognized the importance of maize in sustaining life, and it was seen as a gift from the gods. In Olmec art, the imagery of maize gods and fertility figures often appears, reflecting the deep connection between agricultural cycles and the cosmic order. Just as the Maya saw their agricultural practices as tied to the celestial cycles, the Olmec viewed the growth of maize as a reflection of the balance between the human and divine realms. The Olmec did not have the same sophisticated astronomical systems as the Maya, but they shared a similar understanding of the cosmos as a dynamic force that influenced every aspect of life. Their art, with its recurring motifs of animals, gods, and natural elements, reflects their belief in a world where the spiritual and physical realms were constantly interacting. The Olmec's colossal stone heads, which represent powerful rulers or gods, may have also symbolized their connection to the divine forces that govern the universe. These heads, like the jaguar and the maze, were symbolic of the strength and power that flowed from the spiritual world into the human realm. Though the Maya and Olmec had different approaches to understanding the cosmos, they shared a common belief in the interconnectedness of the universe. For the Maya, the cosmos was a vast and ordered system, with the stars and planets acting as guides for life on Earth. For the Olmec, the cosmos was a more fluid and ever-changing force, shaped by the natural world and the power of the gods. Both civilizations, however, saw their lives as intimately connected to the cosmos, and their religious practices, art, and architecture all reflected this belief. The stars, the earth, the gods, and the people were all part of a larger, divine cycle, a cycle that, if honored, would ensure prosperity, balance, and harmony. As the warmth of the sun rises higher in the sky, the steady rhythm of nature begins to pulse through the lands of ancient Mesoamerica. The air smells of rich earth and the faint scent of tropical flowers. The lush, green jungles of the Maya and the fertile plains of the Olmec have long been the foundations of their civilizations, providing not only the means for survival but the core around which their cultures flourished. Agriculture, particularly the cultivation of maize and cacao, was central to the prosperity of both the Maya and the Olmec, and their relationship with the land shaped their economies, social structures, and religious practices. Let's begin in the dense, humid jungles of the Maya, where maize, corn, was the lifeblood of their society. The Maya were, above all, farmers, and their mastery of agriculture allowed them to build complex cities and sustain large populations. The vast jungles around them provided fertile soil, but the Maya knew that in order to thrive, they had to work in harmony with the environment. The Maya practiced a combination of slash-and-burn agriculture, where sections of the jungle were cleared for planting, and terracing, where fields were built into the mountainsides to prevent erosion and make use of every available inch of land. Imagine yourself walking through a verdant field of maize, the tall plants swaying gently in the breeze. The land, rich with life, is nurtured through careful management. Maize was not just the staple crop of the Maya, it was also a sacred gift from the gods. The Maya believed that humans were made from maize, and this crop was central to their spiritual and physical existence. Every meal, every festival, and every religious offering involved maize in some form. The Maya would grind the maize into flour and mix it with water to make tortillas, a food that sustained them through their daily lives. Beyond the basic nourishment it provided, maize was also essential to their religious practices. Rituals and ceremonies often involved offerings of maize to the gods, believing that by feeding the gods with this sacred food, they would ensure prosperity and balance in the world. In addition to maize, the Maya also cultivated a variety of other crops, including beans, squash, and chili peppers, which complemented maize in the traditional Mesoamerican triad of staple foods. Cacao, however, was another crop that held special significance for the Maya. Known for its rich, complex flavor, cacao was revered not only as a luxury food but also as a form of currency and a divine substance. Cacao beans were traded across Mesoamerica and were used in ceremonies to honor the gods. The Maya believed that cacao was a gift from the gods, particularly from the god of the underworld, who was said to have presented the first cacao tree to humanity. Imagine the rich scent of cacao filling the air, as the Maya would prepare it into a frothy, bittersweet beverage, often mixed with chili, and offered in religious ceremonies. Cacao was so precious that it was sometimes used as currency in the Maya trade system. The Mayas' advanced agricultural techniques, including their ability to cultivate crops in the challenging terrain of the jungle, allowed them to sustain their complex society. By carefully managing their land and the resources around them, they ensured that their civilization could thrive for centuries, even as other cultures faced challenges related to food production. Their agricultural practices, rooted in a deep understanding of the land and the natural world, became a cornerstone of their social and economic systems, providing the sustenance needed for the development of one of the most sophisticated civilizations in pre-Columbian America. Now, as you shift your focus from the jungles of the Maya to the coastal plains of the Olmec, the landscape changes, but the connection to the land remains just as strong. The Olmec, often regarded as the mother culture of Mesoamerica, relied on agriculture to build their society, but their environment presented a different set of challenges. The Olmec lived in a region that was rich in resources but also prone to flooding and other natural hazards. The Gulf Coast, where the Olmec flourished, was fertile but required careful management to prevent destruction from seasonal rains and rising waters. Like the Maya, the Olmec cultivated maize as their primary crop. However, their relationship with maize was shaped by the availability of other vital resources, particularly water. The Olmec lived in a region where rivers and wetlands were abundant, and their farming practices were likely centered around managing water for irrigation. Flooding could provide fertile soil for crops, but it also posed a risk to the stability of their communities. The Olmec would have relied on their deep understanding of water management to protect their fields and sustain their agricultural practices. Much like the Maya, the Olmec understood that agriculture was not just about growing food, it was about maintaining a delicate balance between nature and human activity. In addition to maize, the Olmec also grew crops such as beans, squash, and chili peppers, forming the essential Mesoamerican triad. However, cacao was not as central to Olmec society as it was to the Maya. Instead, the Olmec focused more on their trade networks, which allowed them to access other luxury items like jade and rubber, which they traded for goods like cacao from other regions. Rubber, in particular, was a commodity of great value to the Olmec, who used it not only for making the rubber balls used in their ceremonial ball games but also for a variety of practical and ritualistic purposes. The Olmec were likely the first to introduce rubber as a commodity in Mesoamerica, and their influence can be seen in the later use of rubber by other Mesoamerican cultures. Though the Olmec's agricultural practices were less documented than those of the Maya, it is clear that they understood the importance of their environment and the crops that sustained them. The Olmec may have lacked the advanced terrace farming systems of the Maya, but their reliance on water management and their strategic use of trade allowed them to thrive in their environment. The Olmec's relationship with their land, crops, and resources laid the foundation for many of the agricultural practices that would be adopted by later civilizations in the region. In both the Maya and Olmec civilizations, agriculture was not just an economic activity, it was deeply entwined with their spiritual and cultural beliefs. Maize, cacao, and other crops were not just sustenance, they were sacred, imbued with divine significance. As the day begins to fade into twilight, you take a step back and reflect on the intricate social fabric that held the Maya and Olmec civilizations together. These were societies that, despite their outward differences, shared a common understanding of the importance of hierarchy, organization, and social roles. The structures of these societies were deeply embedded in their cultures, influencing not only their political systems but their agricultural practices, religious beliefs, and even their daily lives. In both the Maya and Olmec worlds, the social order was marked by a division between the elites and the common people, but the way in which each society organized itself reflected its unique relationship with the environment, the gods, and the cosmos. Let's begin with the Maya, whose complex social system was both flexible and rigid, shaped by the needs of their city-states, their religious practices, and their deep connection to the natural world. Imagine yourself walking through a Maya city-state, perhaps Tikal or Palenque, where the central plaza is filled with activity. The bustling marketplace is surrounded by towering stone temples, and the air hums with the rhythms of daily life. Here, society is stratified. There are the elites, the scribes, the merchants, the artisans, and the farmers, each occupying a specific role within the larger community. At the top of this social pyramid sits the ruler, the Ajah. The Ajah, or king, was not just a political leader but a divine figure who acted as an intermediary between the gods and the people. The Maya believed that the king was chosen by the gods and that his actions, from conducting ceremonies to leading wars, were vital for maintaining harmony between the human and divine realms. The Ajah's authority was reinforced by the belief that he had the power to ensure the prosperity of the city-state, particularly through the performance of religious rituals and the offerings made to the gods. The king's role as both a political leader and a spiritual guide was central to Maya society. Beneath the ruler were the nobility and priests, who wielded significant power over the city-state's religious and political life. The priests, often closely allied with the ruling family, were responsible for performing sacred rituals, interpreting the movements of the stars, and ensuring that the gods were appeased. These religious leaders held a prestigious position in society, and their influence was felt throughout the city-state. They were responsible for maintaining the cyclical order of time through the use of the complex Maya calendars, and their understanding of astronomy allowed the Maya to track the movements of celestial bodies with remarkable accuracy. The merchants, artisans, and scribes occupied an important but subordinate position within Maya society. Merchants were the lifeblood of trade, exchanging goods like jade, cacao, and textiles across vast distances. Artisans, skilled in pottery, stone carving, and weaving, created the objects that were essential for both everyday life and religious rituals. The scribes, a highly respected group, were responsible for recording the history, genealogies, and religious texts of the city-state, preserving the knowledge of the Maya civilization for future generations. While these groups were vital to the economy and culture of the Maya, they were still considered below the ruling elite in terms of social status. At the base of this pyramid were the farmers, who made up the majority of the population. The farmers were responsible for producing the food that sustained the entire society. They worked the land, cultivating maize, beans, squash, and other crops, and often faced hardships due to the challenges of working in the jungle environment. While their work was crucial to the survival of the Maya city-states, farmers had limited social mobility, as their role in society was often viewed as less prestigious than that of the elites. However, the importance of agriculture and the vital role farmers played in sustaining the civilization was not overlooked, and they were often included in religious rituals, particularly those related to the agricultural calendar. In contrast, the Olmec social structure, while similarly hierarchical, was simpler in its organization, reflecting the more decentralized nature of Olmec society. The Olmec civilization was centered around a series of ceremonial centers, such as San Lorenzo and La Venta, where monumental stone sculptures and large plazas served as the focal points of both spiritual and political life. Unlike the Maya, the Olmec did not have a highly developed system of city-states, but their society was still organized around a clear division of roles. At the top of the Olmec social hierarchy were the elites, likely the rulers and priests, who held political and religious power. The Olmec ruler, much like the Maya Ajah, was considered a divine figure, connected to the gods and responsible for ensuring the prosperity of the people. However, the Olmec rulers did not have the same elaborate court structures as the Maya. Their power was more directly linked to their ability to maintain control over the ceremonial centers, which were the heart of Olmec society. These rulers were seen as intermediaries between the gods and the people, and their authority was reinforced through monumental art, such as the colossal stone heads, which depicted them as larger-than-life figures imbued with divine power. Beneath the rulers were the priests, who were responsible for conducting rituals and ensuring the proper functioning of the ceremonial centers. The Olmec religion was centered around the worship of natural forces, including the jaguar, water, and maize, and the priests played a central role in connecting the people to these forces. The priests, like their counterparts in Maya society, would have been highly respected and would have held significant influence over the social and political life of the Olmec people. However, unlike the Maya, the Olmec priests were not as involved in the political leadership of the society, as their role was more focused on maintaining spiritual harmony. The artisans and traders also played an important role in Olmec society, though their status was lower than that of the elites. The Olmec were skilled in the production of jade carvings, pottery, and figurines, many of which were used in religious ceremonies. Trade, particularly in jade and rubber, was essential to the Olmec economy, and their trade networks extended across Mesoamerica. However, despite their economic importance, artisans and traders were not part of the ruling class, and their social status was subordinate to that of the elites. As the stars begin to twinkle in the night sky, the bustling activity of ancient Mesoamerica slows, and you find yourself reflecting on the figures who shaped the course of history, the rulers of the Maya and the Olmec civilizations. These leaders were more than just political figures. They were divine representatives of the gods, tasked with maintaining harmony between the human and spiritual worlds. Yet, while both the Maya and the Olmec viewed their rulers as powerful, semi-divine figures, their systems of leadership, their roles in society, and the legacies they left behind were shaped by very different cultural, political, and religious forces. Let's first step into the world of the Maya, where the king, known as the Ajah, was the central figure in both the political and spiritual life of the city-state. Imagine yourself walking through the bustling central plaza of a Maya city like Tikal or Palenque, where the pyramids and temples rise high above the streets. The air is thick with incense, and the sound of ceremonial drums fills the space. Here you can see the Ajah, the ruler, dressed in elaborate regalia, standing at the top of a grand pyramid, overseeing the people below. His position was not simply that of a political leader. The Ajah was believed to be divinely chosen, a representative of the gods on earth. His authority was derived from his ability to maintain cosmic order and his divine connection to the gods. The Ajah's role was multifaceted. Politically, he was the head of the city-state, responsible for maintaining law and order, leading military campaigns, and ensuring the prosperity of his people. But perhaps more importantly, the Ajah was a religious figure, seen as the intermediary between the gods and the people. Maya society was deeply spiritual, and the ruler's success was often measured by his ability to communicate with the gods through rituals, offerings, and sacrifices. The Ajah conducted elaborate ceremonies, often atop the Grand Pyramids, to appease the gods and ensure that the agricultural cycles would continue, that rain would fall, and that the sun would rise each day. His leadership was not only political, it was spiritual, and his power was sustained by his connection to the divine. The Maya rulers were also deeply invested in the performance of sacred rituals, which were essential for maintaining the balance between the human and divine realms. One of the most important acts for the Ajah was the performance of bloodletting rituals, in which he would offer his own blood to the gods in exchange for blessings. This act, though intense and often painful, was viewed as a necessary sacrifice to ensure the welfare of the people. The Ajah's role as a divine figure also extended to his family, as royal bloodlines were believed to carry the divine connection to the gods. Thus, the power of the Maya ruler was both inherited and earned through divine favor, and his authority was absolute as long as he fulfilled his role as intermediary between the celestial and earthly realms. Now, as you move away from the towering pyramids of the Maya, you find yourself in the open plains of the Olmec, where the social and political structure was less elaborate but no less important. The Olmec, though not as politically organized as the Maya, had rulers who were equally revered and respected. However, the Olmec system of leadership was different. Unlike the Maya city-states, which were governed by a complex hierarchy of rulers and elites, the Olmec civilization was more centralized around a series of ceremonial centers. These centers, such as San Lorenzo and La Venta, were not just political hubs but also religious centers, where the power of the rulers was closely tied to the gods and the forces of nature. The Olmec rulers, while not as publicly visible as their Maya counterparts, were still seen as powerful spiritual figures. Their authority was based on their ability to communicate with the divine and maintain the balance between the human and natural worlds. The Olmec were deeply spiritual, and their rulers were believed to be intermediaries between the gods and the people, much like the Maya Jah. However, the Olmec leadership was less formalized and more symbolic, with power often concentrated in the hands of a few individuals or families who controlled the ceremonial centers. The Olmec rulers were not involved in the same level of territorial conquest or military leadership as the Maya kings, but their power was no less significant. The colossal heads that the Olmec left behind, massive stone sculptures of what are believed to be rulers, serve as a testament to the power and authority of the Olmec elite. These heads, often found at ceremonial centers, were not just artistic creations. They were symbols of leadership, strength, and divine authority. The rulers depicted in these statues were likely seen as the earthly embodiment of the gods, with their power rooted in their connection to the divine forces that govern the Olmec world. In contrast to the Maya, the Olmec did not have a highly organized system of written records or detailed royal genealogies. Their rulers, though powerful, were less focused on maintaining a historical legacy through written inscriptions. Instead, their authority was largely based on symbolism and ritual. The colossal heads, along with other Olmec art and artifacts, were not just representations of the rulers but were also spiritual symbols, connecting the rulers to the forces of nature, such as the jaguar and the water gods. These symbols were meant to reinforce the rulers' divine right to govern, as their power was believed to be directly linked to their ability to harness the spiritual forces of the world around them. Despite these differences, both the Maya and the Olmec shared a common understanding of leadership as a divine and spiritual role. For the Maya, the Ajah was not just a political figure but a living god, whose authority was reinforced through elaborate rituals and ceremonies. For the Olmec, the rulers were spiritual intermediaries who maintained their authority through symbolism and their connection to the divine forces of nature. Both civilizations, in their own ways, recognized that true leadership came not just from political power but from a deep connection to the gods and the natural world. As we near the final moments of our journey through the ancient worlds of the Maya and Olmec, we are reminded of the profound impact their leadership had on the very structure of their societies. The rulers of these civilizations were not simply political figures but were spiritual guides and protectors, entrusted with maintaining the cosmic order and ensuring the prosperity of their people. Their leadership styles, though rooted in similar religious and political principles, differed in significant ways, reflecting the unique environments and cultural contexts of each civilization. Let us first turn our attention to the Maya, where the king, known as the Ajah, was a central figure in both the political and spiritual life of the city-state. In Maya society, the Ajah was not just a ruler but a divine intermediary, believed to be chosen by the gods to govern his people. The Ajah's role was multifaceted. He was a political leader, overseeing the administration of his city-state, but he was also the chief priest, responsible for ensuring the spiritual and agricultural well-being of his people. The Ajah's authority was reinforced by his direct connection to the gods, and his ability to maintain cosmic harmony through rituals, sacrifices, and ceremonies was seen as essential to the survival of the community. As you stand in the shadow of a grand Maya pyramid, you can almost feel the weight of the Ajah's responsibilities. The ruler's actions were believed to affect the very course of time and the balance between the natural and divine realms. The Maya believed that the Ajah could communicate directly with the gods through bloodletting, sacrifices, and sacred offerings. These rituals, often performed atop the pyramids and in temple courtyards, were not merely ceremonial. They were vital acts of governance that ensured the prosperity of the city-state. The Ajah's leadership was not just about maintaining law and order. It was about keeping the gods appeased and ensuring the continued favor of the heavens. Beyond his religious duties, the Ajah was also a warrior. Maya city-states were often in conflict with one another, and the Ajah played a key role in leading his people to war, defending his city-state from rival factions, and expanding his domain. Military conquest was not just about gaining territory. It was about asserting the divine right of the ruler to govern and maintain order. The captives taken in battle were often used in religious sacrifices, reinforcing the idea that warfare and religion were intertwined in the Maya worldview. As you turn your gaze from the towering pyramids of the Maya to the quiet, serene landscape of the Olmec, the atmosphere shifts. Here, the ceremonial centers and monumental stone heads stand as silent witnesses to the unique form of leadership that characterized the Olmec civilization. The Olmec rulers, though not as publicly visible as their Maya counterparts, were still powerful figures, deeply connected to the spiritual and natural forces that governed their world. Unlike the Maya, who were organized into multiple city-states with powerful rulers, the Olmec were a more centralized society, with power concentrated around key ceremonial centers like San Lorenzo and La Venta. In Olmec society, the ruler was also seen as a divine figure, but the emphasis was less on warfare and conquest and more on spiritual leadership. The Olmec rulers were believed to be intermediaries between the gods and the people, tasked with maintaining the spiritual balance of the universe. They were not so much military conquerors but guardians of the cosmic order, responsible for ensuring that the forces of nature, such as the rain and the fertility of the land, were in harmony. The colossal heads that dot the Olmec landscapes serve as powerful symbols of this divine leadership. These massive stone sculptures, believed to represent rulers or deities, convey the sense of authority and spiritual power that the Olmec rulers wielded. The Olmec rulers, unlike the Maya, did not engage in large-scale territorial conquests or widespread military campaigns. Instead, their power was more symbolic, expressed through their control of ceremonial centers and their ability to influence the spiritual and natural forces of the world. The Olmecs' power was rooted in their connection to the divine, and their leadership was reinforced through art, ritual, and the control of important resources like jade and rubber. While the Maya rulers may have waged wars to expand their empires, the Olmec rulers maintained their authority through spiritual leadership and the symbolism of their colossal stone heads and other monumental artworks. Though the Olmec civilization was more fleeting than the Maya, their influence on later Mesoamerican cultures, including the Maya, is undeniable. The Olmec laid the foundations for many of the religious and political practices that would be adopted by subsequent civilizations, including the use of monumental art to symbolize political and divine power. The Olmec rulers may not have been as visible or as militaristic as the Maya Jaws, but their leadership was no less significant. Their connection to the gods and the natural world shaped the course of Mesoamerican history and left a lasting legacy. As we reflect on the contrasting roles of the Maya Jaw and the Olmec rulers, we see two forms of leadership that were both deeply spiritual and profoundly political. The Maya rulers, with their intricate religious ceremonies and military conquests, held power through a complex system of governance and divine right. The Olmec rulers, on the other hand, maintained their authority through spiritual leadership and the symbolism of monumental art. Both civilizations understood that true leadership came not just from political power, but from a deep connection to the divine forces that governed their worlds.